Dun, dun,
Music, Mike.
dun, dun.
There it is. We don't have the budget yet for an actual theme song, so we have to improvise.
All right,
Welcome,
yeah,
everybody.
put it up in the chat.
There it is.
What's going on? What's going on?
And we've got the built-in echo. So make sure that you mute your speaker. Or don't play the live stream.
I was trying to like share it real quick first.
Gotcha. All right, we'll give you a second. Are we good?
Yeah, I've had my thing on mute. I'm sitting here talking to you, and my thing is on mute.
Welcome back, everybody. Last week we had a great discussion, so we're back again.
Thing on mute. I'm sitting here
I'm
talking
Mike
to you.
Scala. And I keep hearing myself. Someone has the live stream up.
That's me. I'm about to kill it. I just gotta share
Okay.
it.
Technical difficulties. Where's that screenshot? It's like technical difficulties.
We need you to recreate that. You're our special effects / music guy right now.
Word. I'll have to find it on YouTube or something.
Okay, just posted. Hopefully I didn't cut myself off. Good.
So
Hopefully my wife won't turn it on in the other room and create feedback.
Okay, we good? I'm still here. Are we good?
yeah, we're good.
We're good. No? I still hear it. I think, Michael, I think you still got the live stream playing on your...
Now I
device,
kill
so-
that tab. That's not me.
It's not me. We're good.
Tab is gone. I'm not hearing that. What
I
you
hear it.
hearing is
Is
the
it mine?
feedback to us.
Let me close out. Are we good? Maybe it was me.
Wait, where's that? I have to put that noise.
I think we're good now. Are we good?
I don't hear any echo at all now.
Yeah, I don't hear any.
All right, we're finally good.
It was Mike.
It might have been me. I closed out of everything. Could very well have been me. But nonetheless, we are back live on Facebook. I'm Mike Scala, joined again by a Timid Carter, hip hop MC / co-chair BLM Tokyo. It is 9 o'clock in the morning in Tokyo right now.
It is 9 o'clock in the morning in Tokyo, and it's overcast right now.
Good morning to you. It is raining here in New York.
Well, we've got snow over here. I've probably trying to change.
We also have a very special guest with us this week, consultant Michael Lambert. How are you, Michael?
Mike is doing well. Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks for
Oh.
having me.
Not
I'm
a
surrounded now.
Yes. And I wanted to congratulate you. We'll get to a little bit later on your big win in East New York, helping out
Thank you.
assembly member out in
Appreciate that.
But we like to start off with something on the lighter side. And Bel Air, new show. I think we've all seen it. What are our thoughts?
I like it. Go ahead, Michael.
I was gonna say, it's funny because I watched the original, obviously growing up, and I thought it was interesting the way that it's not necessarily a comedy per se. It's got some comic relief moments in it, but I think it's like a real story that's like true to life that a lot of people can relate to, probably more so than the original sitcom. I think it took like some of the more gritty aspects of the sitcom and made that pretty much the underlying theme. So I thought it was good. I thought they had some good character development. I think the storyline is pretty good. It's interesting the way they kind of like changed Carlton's character a bit. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Overall, I think it's pretty good.
They really did some changes with Carlton though. Yo.
Right. And I liked it as well, but I think that was perhaps the source of the disconnect with me. The fact that using all the same character names, they're having it take place in the present day. And so it's kind of hard for me to buy into a world where the original Fresh Prince just doesn't exist, right? Because if it did, they'd always scream, we have the same names as the Fresh Prince. Obviously that we're supposed to watch the show thinking that never happened. But it's so foundational to the hip hop culture. It's kind of hard for me to get into it. Like it's hard for me to look at Carlton even in a different light, or Hillary. any of these characters in such a different light. And they're playing J. Cole songs a lot. There's Petey Crack. There's a lot of Philly hip hop in there. I can't buy into a world in which these artists came up without Fresh Prince being an influence. Even I'm like so caught up on that. I know you're supposed to kind of take that with a grain of salt, just watch it as its own show. But to me, Fresh Prince was so foundational to hip hop culture that it's hard to really buy into a world that has hip hop as a very prevalent part of the show, but really erases Fresh Prince from its history. I'm like, are we supposed to believe that J. Cole didn't come up singing in West Philadelphia, born and raised in the mirror? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what's rubbing me the wrong way about it.
Yeah, you're going too deep with it. You're going too deep with it.
I think that's an interesting observation.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. But yeah, I mean, I like the show. It's starting to go a little bit, it is a little bit soap opera-y to some degree. But other than that, I do like it. I like the take, and I think the story about it, the journey to where it got to being made is what's really interesting about it. Because this actually started out as a short fan-made trailer on YouTube by an independent guy. He got together with his people and decided to make this reimagining trailer, and it went viral. Will Smith saw it and was like, wow, that's a hot idea. Connected with him, they talked, chopped it up, and then Will Smith shopped it, and that's how they got the series. And so now there's now a series based on that guy's concept. And he was just a guy that was doing his stuff on YouTube type of thing. So it's a real success story in that, right? But yeah, I think it's good. I enjoy it.
It's just so hard to avoid comparisons to the original, given that characters are all named the same, and it's just a recreation in present day, which is what they were going for. So you can't have the show for what it is without that. So I guess it's a double-edged sword, because it probably wouldn't have been as big either if it was just some new show that came out. But it's still kind of hard for me to buy into it. I was talking to Big Pun's widow, Lisa, and I was saying, a bunch of people have said this too. I was like, it would be like if there was a show where Italians were cooking with sauce and bread and cheese, but nobody said we're making pizza here. Like, to me, like, Fresh Prince is so foundational to hip hop culture. I'm waiting for someone to yell out, "This is the story of Fresh Prince," or you know what I mean, or how can I buy into everything in hip hop is the same without Fresh Prince being a part of it? To me, that's a little hard for me to swallow.
But I think so again.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think you raised an interesting point though, because if you look at the way that the music was used in the original compared to now, the show wasn't really built around the music. I feel like this current version is built more around like the Meek Mill.
Yes.
Really kind of like, this feels like something that's driven by hip hop.
Right.
Say the original sitcom felt like it was driven by hip hop. It was driven by Will Smith as an artist in the genre. And the whole thing was kind of built around what we knew Will Smith. Will Smith was not a gangster rapper. You know what I mean? So the fact that the show was more lighthearted, with certain exceptions, and built around like this very bubbly, West Philadelphia born and raised kind of concept, compared to like, Meek Mill and some of the other real thumping, beats that they're like playing in this one. I think that also kind of gives you like a comparison, even though they're similar, that they're just not the same. It's one concept has evolved from the original in a very different way that is more applicable to what young people listen to today.
Right.
No respect to Will, but people are not going out there bumping, West Philadelphia born and raised.
That is true. But what did Fresh Prince, the show, do for the Philadelphia hip hop scene? And this current version of the show really pays homage to the Philadelphia hip hop scene in a major way. You mentioned, Petey Crack, Meek Mill. Without Will Smith, without the Fresh Prince show even putting Philly hip hop on the map, would any of those artists have been where they are today? I mean, you really can't say, but to me, it's hard to envision a world in which they exist, but Fresh Prince doesn't.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. But one of that on that comparison, as far as the music goes, like the first one was very much a sitcom, right? So the music that was played there weren't any hits on the, wasn't any known songs. It was just, jingle music for the song. For the series. Whereas this, they're playing hits, they're playing records that people know with that soundtrack. So my question though, off of that though, would be, would you prefer a remake with a recasting, like the original, or what we've got now,
Hmm. I
where
think
it's being
Watch the
goofy.
original in its an updated form. I think I'd prefer to see what they're showing now.
Mhm.
what if it was based loosely on the original concept, but with different character names? It wasn't Will Smith and Carlton Banks and Hillary Banks and Philip Banks. Because to me, it's almost like it feels sacrilegious in the sense that they're messing with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which is again so foundational to hip hop culture. How can you avoid comparisons with the original when you watch it?
I think it'd be a hard sell. It'd be a hard sell if you did it that way, because the hook of this is that it is a reimagining of the
I
something that
agree.
we know.
Like I was
Yeah.
saying before, it probably wouldn't be what it is. We wouldn't be having this discussion if it was just a random show on Peacock, right?
Right. What
True.
about, how about instead of that, what about a continuation? Now it's Fresh Prince of Bel-Air with Will Smith as an adult, and he's got his kids, and see what happened to his life after the series ended. Michael's like, nah, I
I
don't
don't know if
care
that
about
would
I
hit
don't know
the
if he's
same,
behind
man.
that
I don't know if I would
one.
tune into that.
No, but you did mention also the
things
original
they did
show.
with like Hillary. Even if you look at the Hillary
Oh.
character,
Yeah,
different from like the giddy Hillary of like the sitcom. You know, she's more socially conscious.
right.
She's actually like kind of like calling people out on like, you know, issues of the day. And still doing it in kind of like a lighthearted way, but I think she's more relatable than the original. And I think that's one
She
thing.
is more relatable. You're right.
I think every character in this version is more relatable than the characters in the sitcom. And maybe that's what I'm feeling. I feel like this is more authentic. And not that you know it had to be a comedy, which is obviously not, but I feel like the character development is more authentic and more real, and I can relate more to these characters than the sitcom, which felt more like, okay, that's a different world. I mean, I've been to Beverly Hills and Bel Air before, and I still never saw people act like that. So,
Right. Well, the thing about the sitcom was it was lighthearted and it was comedy, but it had those moments that were serious, that were
right.
Then when
Like
they
the episode
happened,
when they
they were
got
much
pulled
more
over.
impactful, right? Because
Yeah.
it's surrounded by the comedy. So when the serious moment happens, you're like, whoa, it really holds you.
It definitely gripped more.
You know? But I did like the parallel in the original sitcom. You see Will Smith with posters on his wall of sometimes underground rappers at the time. Like he had the Intelligent Hoodlum, Tragic Coffee on there. And in this version, you had Carlton with an MF Doom poster on his wall. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. But I'm enjoying it, you know. You can say I don't know if people watch it, so I don't know if we want to say specific points, but you know, I think Carlton's wilding. But I can't excuse that Will has overstepped and disrespected on Carlton. And let's find out Jeffrey's a whole goon out this place. Like, come on, what? I don't know if y'all saw the last episode, but
yeah, I saw that. I caught that. It got hood.
Yeah.
Well,
but Jeffrey is like myself, Jamaican in the show.
Right, they did that change. They like, yeah, like he's Jamaican, he's not from England, you know.
You know, you more like a Brixton transplant, Jeffrey.
His demeanor is totally different. It's just like,
this is not like Uptown Jeffrey.
Nah. So I think
we are live on Facebook. So anyone out there who watched the show, give us your thoughts, along with whatever else we happen to be discussing here. On a more serious note, Michael, congratulations once again on your hard work out there in Brooklyn.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Assembly member Nikki Lucas.
Correct.
What was that experience like for you? Were you managing the campaign?
Yeah, so basically, you know, I actually managed Keisha Lean, who is now a sitting judge in the 7th Municipal Civil Court District in Brooklyn. A good portion of the 7th overlaps with the 60th. And Nikki actually ran a very tough race for city council where she lost by just 1,100 votes against Charles Barron. And some of you may tune in and say, wow, 1,100 votes, that's a big margin. It's not if you understand the dynamics of that district and what Charles Barron kind of brings to the table. He and his wife have pretty much been seat holders between the assembly and the council going back like probably close to 3 decades now. And they're kind of like a household name where, you know, from, my interaction on the ground, there are a lot of people out there who would just vote for a Barron because that's the name they knew. And so for Nikki to come that close in the council race, that's a very good showing.
It's a big feat. And no disrespect to the Barons, by the way. I always tell the story.
Not at all. Not at all.
In Albany, people would ask me, who was the most friendly senator or assembly member? And believe it or not, for me, it was always Charles Barron. He was the most friendly colleague I had who was actually an elected official in Albany. People might not.
He's a unique individual. I used to run into
personable guy
on Fulton Street in Bed-Stuy, and he would just be walking down the street by, hey man, how you doing?
Yeah.
But when he gets into like the political space, it's a little bit different. And Nikki decided she wanted to run for assembly, and she asked me if I would be her campaign manager. And I saw the opportunity. Nikki's been backed by the likes of Congressmember Hakeem Jeffrey in the past, who also endorsed her in this race. Me, I chase opportunity. Mike knows this about me. Mike has actually been on some campaigns with me in the past, so he knows how I roll, so to speak. And I thought it would be a good opportunity, and I was anticipating that we would actually be going up against Inez Barron, but the Barons decided that I'm not going to run.
What happened with that? They've been able to switch seats between council and assembly. Why?
I don't know if they just wanted to change, but they ran a protege. By the name of Karan Allen, who was a deputy community board manager. He'd worked for Charles up in Albany. But Nikki had a lot going for her in this race. So I think we just parlayed a lot of her opportunities. She had name recognition coming off a very strong performance in the city council race. She had an identifiable base. She had a number of people around her who were committed to her and helping her win. Uniquely in this district, the male and female district leaders are the Barons. But interestingly, Nikki actually had run more candidates for judicial delegate than the Barons did. So with the way that this worked, because it's a special election at the state level, you either have to go out there and create a party name, and Mike's seen me with this before. It's actually how I first met Mike, I think, in terms of like working with Mike on another race, which had similar dynamics. You either have to try and get the party line, or you get an established line, or you literally have to make up a line that doesn't sound like it, and then go out there and pound the pavement.
Well, yes. So let's talk about this, because this was a special election for a state level seat. So that's different than if there was a special election for a city seat, right? We have different laws.
Correct.
So for a city council member, for example, if they leave office in the middle of their term, oftentimes a special election is held to fill the remainder of their term. And then you have what's called a nonpartisan election, where everyone has to make up their own party line and run with it.
Correct. There's no established party line that's
go to vote with
like
Mike for the community or whatever. Everyone has their own name.
Right.
But that contrast, which was an assembly member had left their seat in the middle of a term. And so the special election for an assembly member is between nominees chosen by the parties. Or if you want to run as an independent, you can do that as well. But it's as if there's a general election and you already have nominees for the parties, and there's no primary. So you can't go as a primary voter and pick the Democratic nominee or the Republican nominee if there were to be one. The party committees have to choose their candidates. And that means that it really turns on you having that influence, I guess, within the party, right?
I would say, I see support, and I think that, there were things that I think left like kind of like a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Like when I heard some people criticizing the fact that, she's controlling county committee and this, that, and the third. And I was with Nikki when she was running around all over every end of the 60th Assembly District at all hours. I had to go back and actually reacclimate myself to doing, what's that called again? Doing mail merges, to print out like the petitions so that they were pristine, they were accurate. And then she literally drove all over the place at all hours of the night, collecting signatures from people.
Right.
And so some
people, she's really self-made.
Say again?
She's really self-made. She wasn't put off.
Yeah, so and some people are like, the machine controls the petitions. I'm like, what are y'all talking about? Like, there's a lot of effort that was put into getting these pieces of paper.
Right.
People had to sign them.
And to me, that's the ultimate compliment, though. I mean, she should really be flattered by that, because she came in on the ground level. I mean, I'm in a similar position. I didn't come in backed by any kind of establishment, a timid note.
Right.
Working together, building what we had from nothing, to the point now where if someone comes and says, oh, look at you, you have too much control, influence, power. Like, no one gave anything to me. I just built my support by going to the people directly
Right. And to build like county committee support in a vacuum, that's not a small undertaking.
Right, exactly.
Those people have to really kind of like confide and have, believe in you, and so basically they voted to make her the Democratic Party nominee. And I think some people took issue with that. Next thing you know, we read in the paper, well, the Barron candidate's going to get support from the Working Families Party, which was a bit unique because, again, if you look at, Charles is, very proud Black socialist, has his roots as like an OG Black Panther. And I think the candidate they ran was kind of like, espousing similar values. But then it was kind of weird because then, to espouse like Black socialist principles, and then you're taking support from people who in some cases have been labeled as like quote unquote white gentrifiers in a majority minority district, a significantly majority minority district. It's like it's kind of hard to reconcile that.
Was there much space in terms of policy between the candidates, or was it more of a clash of personality?
Yes, I would say I would probably disagree there because I think
I'm asking the question: was there or was there not?
Oh no, yeah, I would say yes, there was.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. So, and this is all public because the county committee recording is out there. And when Charles kind of like was giving his speech in support of the other candidate, he touted the fact that he had a master's degree, that he had shoveled snow for seniors when it snowed, and that he had actually like reconstituted some community gardens. And Nikki has a record of like getting people at NYCHA their gas back, getting their elevators back working with Sarah City to prevent a rent hike, to establish vaccine centers during COVID, having strong relationships with like city elected officials at the federal and the state level. And again, just a lot of support literally throughout large portion of the community. She's a 40-year resident of Sarah City. So it's not like she just, happened.
Right. So she had the qualifications.
Correct.
What I'm getting at is you mentioned that the Working Families Party endorsed her opponent. And I'm just wondering, is there really a lot of daylight in terms of what both sides are trying to accomplish here? Or are we doing ourselves any favors by being at each other's throats? Or should we be trying to find that common ground?
See, I think what happens in a race like this, people aren't looking for the common ground, they're looking for the win. And I think that probably after the fact, that's probably when people will try and like find, even though I don't see that happening anytime soon, because, the opponent has committed to running again the primary, and then they're saying they're going to run in the general again. That's not an olive branch that's being extended. And, the margin of victory, which is going to grow, is my prediction based on, votes that haven't been counted yet, and where Nikki's support came from. She won by like 60 percentage points.
So is it trying to win then if you're going to keep running even as a third party in the general election in an overwhelmingly Democratic district? Is that trying to win, or is that just trying to prove a point?
No, I think it's trying to win. I think it's a little bit. I think it's a little bit of both because again, the Barron name is strong, and I think that I wouldn't underestimate them. I would not underestimate them. I think that basically, there just has to be a commitment to continue to work hard until everything is all said and done. Don't take anything for granted. One thing I learned working for Scott Stringer was like, you always act like you're behind.
Right.
And everything I do with that, like, because
there are two ways to run.
Two ways. I never heard that.
And unopposed.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you don't want to get comfortable and complacent. Like you see those videos of people like running sprints, they turn over their shoulder to see who's next to them, and the person back. You don't want to be that person. So you just like shore up your support, move forward, and and do the work. And I think that in itself will be formidable. But again, you don't want to take anything for granted. I mean, you look at the numbers, and more people voted for the guy than are registered in the Working Families Party in the district. So somebody decided they wanted to kind of cross lines, and you don't want to take that for granted, no matter how big the margin is, because again, you don't want to have like that Lamborghini come up on you from behind and pass you. You don't want that. So your job is to make sure you're keeping your pedal mashed to the floor and staying as far ahead as that individual as you possibly can. And I think you're seeing these dynamics now. They've called for a special in the 43rd Assembly District, which is another interesting race, turning to another bit of a proxy battle over there, where Brian Cunningham went through a similar that Nikki did. And
congratulations to Brian too.
Yeah, Brian, good guy. I've known Brian for about 10 years now. Wish him well. But again, if I was Brian, again, same thing. Just because you got like, he got like a lion's share. Like Nikki had over 13,000 weighted votes compared to the opponents like 12 or 1,300, maybe even 1,200. I know it was more than 10 to 1. Brian got like over 19,000 weighted votes.
Weighted votes. So you're talking about when district leaders have proxies
Correct.
appointed to the county committee members. So technically it's the county committee that is doing this vote, but many of the members aren't even going to be there. In some cases, I mean, to get cynical, I know this happens in Queens, certainly. Some county committee members don't even know that they're county committee members. They're put on the ballot or put on there by district leaders who then basically, right?
Well, it's kind of funny because one
they
thing
show
I
up
will
to the
say
county
that,
committee meeting with these proxy votes, but they're basically voting on behalf of other county committee members.
true, and it was interesting because Nikki knew every single one of her county committee members. I don't think the folks that voted the other way. And how'd she put it? She said, yeah, I know that some of the folks don't know their county committee members. You know why? Because I reached out to them too.
Right.
So it happens, so there's precedent for that. It does happen. They had a good showing in Brooklyn, though. I think there were over 100 people that showed up for that meeting.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be another fight. And we'll see, because I get the impression that the dynamics there are somewhat different. I'm just kind of like observing that from the outsider right now, and just to see what they bring to the table for the special, which is actually in I think it's a month from today, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it's March 22nd. We'll see if they step on the gas all the way, or again, you kind of like test the waters to see what you're going to do for June,
right?
And on. So it's very interesting, and again,
and that's an interesting point in itself. You've got 3 elections for the same seat in the same year, right?
Yeah.
Is that a waste of taxpayer money? Should we be doing it that way?
I mean, gee, that's probably a question about my pay grade. I mean, it is what it is right now. I think, it was kind of interesting because I think that we want to look for ways to make voting easier, but there were even things in like the special that we just came off of. Like, for example, early voting had 2 poll sites.
Mm-hmm.
Poll sites was outside the physical boundaries of the district where the candidates were running. I've never seen that before, So you see things like that and you say, gee, does that make sense? Probably not. But, can you change it? If so, yeah, I think maybe if there are ways to make the process more efficient, let's look at that. But I think it has to be fair and everybody has to be on the same page again, because, you don't want things driven by agendas or,
right.
You want people to have like the fair shake, so.
Absolutely.
Well, you and I, Michael, we're both county committee members in Queens, which is a little bit different from Brooklyn.
Correct.
I mean, one of which in a district like my own, the Republicans are competitive. In fact, we have a Republican in the council seat right now. We've had prior as well. So in the district in East New York, for example, you can have third parties running. You can have splits in the Democratic Party. It's not going to make a difference. You know that a Democrat is going to win at the end of the day. That's not always the case in the city. It's certainly not in my.
We just saw that in June. The Republicans picked up 3 seats in the council?
You mean last year?
June. Yeah, June.
Last year. Yeah. This past year. Right.
June, November, I should say. Yeah.
Right. So should we be doing more then to try to bring people together? I mean, because these divisions that we see are very detrimental, especially if you're a Democrat, right?
I think we should. I think it's an easy thing to say, though. It's harder to do. Because again, there's a lot of agendas that are driving some of these decisions. And you've got some folks like that, they're just trying to grab power. Some folks are speaking on behalf of neighborhoods that they know nothing about. They don't look like them. They don't represent those neighborhoods, but they may see opportunity to grab legislative power. And that becomes what's driving people. Because I mean, you can't tell me that you're speaking on behalf of people of color. And when I show up to where your groups are, there are no people of color there with you. It doesn't make sense, And I was outspoken, as you know, during the Katz Caban race, and that was one criticism. You're speaking for all the people who are incarcerated, but why is it that anybody who's around you doesn't look like any? I worked on Rikers for 8 years. Why is it that I don't see anyone around you reflective of the folks I saw when I worked inside? But you're speaking for them. So how are you getting, how are they advising you?
So it sounds like what you're saying is if we want bridges to be built, folks have to put the effort into building the bridge.
Correct. And it becomes hard because again, there's a lot of like disharmony.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to build a
that's
bridge to a
true.
neighborhood that like where I think the people can't stand me. We got to get by a few things first before I think we can get to that point.
You also have many districts around the city that are not monolithic by any means. And so they're just so different. How do you have one person represent them all or try to bring people with such diverse interests together and find that common ground? It's not an easy thing to do.
Well, I think that's also interesting, especially with the conversations happening right now with redistricting. You look at like New York 3, which is like goes from Suffolk all the way up to like Lower Westchester. I've never seen
It's a 5-county district, right?
I believe so. It's
5 counties, I think.
like this before in my life.
Yeah, I know.
And if you talk about like a disparate district, that's one of them. There are a few that are like that. Like you look at what's happening now with some of these newly created districts, like Senate District 17, which is a new seat. It's like a microcosm of Queens. You've got Richmond Hill and then kind of like what's that? Is that Middle Village above it or Woodhaven?
Kew Gardens. It goes into
Kew Gardens, Woodhaven, and the kind
goes
of
to Brooklyn as well. Greenpoint.
Yes, it takes only Greenpoint, and Greenpoint is like heavily like left leaning and younger, and Richmond immigrant. It's a very interesting district. It's going to be interesting to see how that race plays itself out. You've got like Kathy Nolan who's retiring. Kathy's a good friend. I wish her all the best with everything that she's going through. But now some folks have dropped out of that race for I'm not sure what's the guy's name, Turbovax. He was in the race, now he's out of the race. Mary, who had ran before, she's out of the race. I believe Juan Ardilla now is vying for that seat, and I'm not sure whoever else. I've heard like rumors that maybe even Jimmy may vie for the seat. So again,
we'll see. We'll see how it plays
we'll
out.
see
At all these seats, you're looking at. We go back to what was the New York 3 with Biaggi trying to come on to Long Island against some pushback, and that goes back
wasn't received well.
Kind of maybe being out of touch with an area that you're trying to serve. But when the area is that vast geographically, how can you be in touch with all of it, right?
Right.
Down that whole area.
And you got to pay a toll.
That's right. Literally.
Pay a toll.
I think like
it's going to be interesting to see how.
Tim, what are your thoughts on all
I was going to, on something like that, when it's so vast and wide, and I think Michael touched on it in a question that how do you reach out to something when it's that vast and wide? And I think for the candidate would have to be on their team building, on who they have around them, who they have advising them, that's representative of those places that they're seeking to be representative for. Karen, on the point you were talking about, Karen in the chat said that Lower Manhattan is now Staten Island represented in the assembly.
Yeah, I saw that. We'll see what happens. That's going to be a competitive race now, and there's been so many rumors about who's running, who's not. You got Max Maliotakis, and at one point, de Blasio's going to run, and he's not. Then Biden's going to run. I'm not sure if that's still in play.
I think Max Rose has a good chance at winning that seat back, but we'll see.
I think it depends on how many other people jump into that race, though. Personally,
that's right.
Because once you get like these races with like candidates, remember the vote margins just like drop precipitously.
But then, because we don't have ranked choice voting on state or
correct
elections, that does a big difference. You could have someone winning a seat who really is only in touch, maybe with a small base. Maybe it's a sizable base in their neighborhood, but maybe they might be out of touch with the rest of the district because they can win with such a small margin when you have a lot of candidates running and splitting the votes up.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right, well, we wanted to talk about crime. I know crime is on everyone's mind in New York. It is a serious issue. We are seeing spikes in violent crime, shootings, murder. It's scary. There's a poll that came out, the Quinnipiac poll earlier this month, that says 74% of New Yorkers say that crime is a major issue, major problem in the city. That's the first time in history that it reached that level. It was never above 50% before. So it's a big spike in the way people are feeling. And there's always controversy about, number one, why is the crime rate up? And number two, and maybe more importantly, how do we address it? What should we do? But you can't answer number two, I don't think, unless you really have an understanding of number one. So what do we think about all this?
Yeah, there was just a news story recently with someone with a big stabbing that took place in a subway or something like a couple of days ago. It's crazy.
It seems like it's constant. Honestly, Tim, it feels like every day there's something, and we're seeing police shootings and all kinds of incidents. And people are scared, people are fed up, people want something to be done. But again, what is the root cause of this? You know, in my opinion, you can't really address the issue unless you have some kind of understanding as to.
Right. I think it's probably I mean, obviously it's going to be a mix of a bunch of different things, and you know, just general conditions. I'm sure COVID plays some sort of a factor. The general atmosphere, polarization of the atmosphere, not just in politics, but in society in general, with people taking such extreme positions on everything.
Yeah.
And then, you know, just there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of you know, anger and things. So, and that tends to contribute to people acting out or doing, you know, wild kind of things.
Yeah, I think, you know, again, we have to look at also the adverse impacts of COVID, not just the health wise, but I mean, economically, it's really not
Yes.
a loop. You know, a lot of people have not gone back to work. It's interesting. My nephew's father-in-law, who was out in Philly, and we were having this debate, and he said, like, you know, what's fueling a lot of the violence from his perspective, I don't know if this is accurate, but this is basically what he believes, and he's very involved with the criminal justice system in Philly. He actually works for Larry Krasner out there. So he has a good, you know, sense of like what's going on. He said, like, you know, a lot of the gang activity, justice system in Philly, fueled by being pent up. They're inside, and they just like start online beefs, and then by the time it transfers to the street, there's no discussion. You know, they just start like you know, letting lead fly. It's something crazy.
Yeah.
I think that's one factor. You know, I do think, you know, I believe that stop and frisk, you know, me personally, I believe I push back from this from other folks, that I think that done in the way, in the manner in which it was intended, which is really stop, question, and frisk. I know a lot of the young people, like, they always throw barbs at me. It's now ACAB, all cops are bad and all that stuff. I don't believe that. And I think that what's happened is, with the advent of the removal of stop and frisk completely, some brothers are no longer afraid to hold. They used to keep it close before, but now they hold it. You know, so when something jumps off, they don't have to go looking for it. They just go in their waistband and start letting off. You know, and we've seen a lot of shootings now just in broad daylight. I mean, I can't recall shootings back in the crack epidemic. I don't recall this many daylight shootings, you know, like this. Never seen it like this before.
I wanna just one thing there, and I'm sure you said it just kind of just as a matter of talking, but you said some brothers aren't afraid to hold anymore. I want to make it clear that it's not just brothers holding guns out there. So
Nah, well, I mean, yeah, it's just
yeah, I know, like
you know what I mean?
way we talk, but some people will listen to that and be
shooters,
like,
right.
"See, he's talking about
No,
black people with guns."
no.
Yeah.
Shooters are not afraid to hold, and basically,
Right,
across race, ethnicity, gender,
right.
religion. You know, we had the other day.
But I also, I mean, obviously there are a lot of factors here, but I don't know if I would attribute it to stop and frisk.
I wouldn't either.
No, but to me personally, and having worked inside, I know a lot of guys that would talk to me, and if they feel that there's going to be a chance they're going to have to do time because they get holding, they're not keeping it on their person. And so I'm speaking from like my own personal anecdotal experience with people who I've known who are not necessarily, you know, the angels of society.
Right.
That when you take that away, if I know that, you know, no one's going to be checking me for this. When I worked at on Jerome Avenue up in the Northwest Bronx, I remember we were walking through the corridor on Jerome Avenue one day with the then inspector of the 5-2, 52nd precinct, Joe Dowling. And we're like looking at the streetlights to see where we should be positioning security cam. And Joe just walks up to this guy, excuse me. He goes and starts grabbing around the guy's waistband. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, no, I thought he was carrying. So, you know, there's a different mindset that some people are just not exposed to, I think, that some people in law enforcement, I think, know that at times if people feel that there's a chance that they're going to get in trouble because they get caught with a weapon, they're less likely to carry that weapon directly on their person. Back in the day, if you recall, you go to the club and like guys would give their girls the weapons because the girls they wouldn't search a girl's purse. You know, so I think that
But don't you think if someone is trying to attack someone, they're going to do it regardless of whether they think they're going to be stopped and frisked or searched? I mean, it's not like people just shooting people on the street, are they? It seems to me that
no, some of these things are random shootings on the street. I mean,
really?
we've seen,
like someone brushes into someone the wrong way, and then now we have a shooting. I mean,
we saw that the other day. There was a guy from sanitation. I don't know if you saw that, broad daylight in Hell's Kitchen. The guy got into what I believe it was like his daughter's ex-boyfriend. He was pummeling the guy, kicking him. The guy went back to his car with his boy. They had some words, and the guy held off, and then he shot him in his leg. Broad daylight.
He went back to his car to get a gun.
I don't know if he actually went back to the car to get the gun. And that part's a little bit. He may have had it on him, but long story, he didn't just whip it out and start firing. He took some time in between the time.
That's my point. But that's my point, right? I mean, maybe there's an element of the guns being more readily available now if they're keeping them closer. But at the end of the day, if you want to attack someone, you're going to do it regardless. I don't think people are saying, well,
I'm not saying you're not going to do it. I'm saying it's going to be less effort if you got a gun in your waistband versus if you have a gun under a brick at the corner. That's what I'm saying.
It will give you some exacerbated courage.
Yeah.
And that point to be more willing to step out on somebody because you got the heat on you, basically.
And so I guess you don't subscribe to the theory then that we're safer if more people are armed.
I don't subscribe to that.
I don't subscribe.
I don't either. I just want to make
But
sure.
I think the mentality of having to care, feeling like you have to carry it, or the mentality of going there immediately, that's something that needs to be dealt with and curbed. Because, like you said, if you're going to attack someone, you're going to attack someone. But if you feel you got to carry and you have to shoot somebody, like, why do you feel that way? What's put you in that position? What's got society in the air in that position that makes you think I need to pop off on somebody?
Or is there an element
I have a question.
More people have guns, and so I got to do something, or he's going to do something to me.
Right. I have a question for Timmy, right? Because you live in Japan right now for the past 8 years, and guns are outlawed in Japan, correct?
For all intents and purposes, yeah. I mean, you can still get a gun, but the way personal handguns are not really a thing. It's more for hunting. But even in that case, you have to go through a lengthy process involving the police department, where you actually have to go through classes with the police department to be able to take possession of a gun. But for all intents and purposes, they're pretty much non-existent in the public, and nobody carries. Some of the police don't even carry guns out here. So gun violence is not really a thing.
Do you think that what you see in Japan could be adopted in the United States, given that we also have like a pretty big gun culture?
I think what the United States is the problem with that, to try to adopt it in the States, is because guns are such an integral part of our culture. I mean, it's been in from our literature to our history. Like, I mean, literally how the West was won is because of guns, and it was a means of survival and whatnot, and that's just translated down the line. And then we've got the constitutional questions. So it's going to be a difficulty to do it. I think it's possible, but it'd be a hard thing. I don't think eliminating guns is going to solve the problems that we have in the United States that's causing people to go and grab them, and I think that's what needs to be dealt with. But
I do want to make a point about the availability of guns, because you always see people saying, and I disagree with this, I think the facts don't support this point, but people are always trying to make the point that if you have stricter gun laws, all you're doing is hurting people who are law abiding, because the criminals don't care. They get guns anyway. People will say that. But that's not really accurate, because if you look at the guns that are recovered that were used to commit crimes in New York, they're almost all from states originally where the gun laws are lax. They're coming from Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania to some extent. You could look at the stats. And so it is a matter of availability, because people are getting these guns at some point from a place where it's easy to get them, then they're being trafficked illegally.
Right.
If you are stricter on the laws, that affects availability, and that will reduce the amount of people who do have guns.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does, like, people say like, well, what about responsible gun owners? And that's fine, but I think the question becomes like, yes, we have the right to bear arms, we have the right to have guns, and there are responsible gun owners. But as a society, if we're looking at the gun violence and the mass shootings, we are obviously not, I guess, mature enough to handle that right. Because if you look at where our statistics are with gun violence, we have to take a look at ourselves and be like, look, as a society, maybe that's not where we're at. We can't handle it yet. We need to mature. Let's see. Karen's
Not an easy question.
No, it's not. Have other societies matured to the point where they can have guns, you think? I mean, because these other societies don't have them the way we do.
No, I don't think
There's
there.
a lot of guns, right? But mostly for hunting.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of places have guns, at least not the way that we do. And what was it? Australia got rid of theirs. There was a mass shooting years back, and they were just like, all right, that's it, that's enough.
No thoughts and prayers. They got them down to action, right?
Yeah, and they got rid of it, and they haven't had, gun violence since. And society's been fine. So, I mean,
but people didn't revolt the way they would in the U.S. Let's be honest. I mean,
oh yeah,
they would get their guns.
My gun, my gun. They just gave them up.
They would. No, people would. Literally, people would get their guns.
Would get their guns.
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference. I mean, United States has these, guns is a religion in the United States. And when I talk to people from different countries who look at the United States and they're like, they don't get it with the guns, and I have to, say like, I understand what they're saying, but also being from the United States, I'm like, I don't think we should eradicate the guns, because I guess it's part of what we know growing up, that it's, but even with the proliferation of all those guns out there, I will say, and I've probably, outside of military or police officers, I've only seen one gun, a personal gun in my life.
People have this idea that if you come to America, you're going to see guns all day long.
Right. So people out here that they think that like, oh yeah, that's been around me everywhere. And I'm just like, nah, I've really only seen one in my life. And I guess it depends on where you're at, but like,
right. It's sad. I mean, I even heard a story of a tourist coming in. I'm not sure if they were from Japan, but there was a tourist coming to the US asking around, what's the best place I can go to see a shootout? It's an ignorant question. What? That's what they thought. They thought coming to the US, they were going to see that everywhere. And that was going to be part of their vacation. They were going to observe an American shootout.
I mean, listen,
US overseas.
There is a sentiment here in Japan in the last several years where some people are afraid to visit the US because of the gun violence. And the police and the police violence, and people, some are afraid to visit the US. They're looking at other places.
Yes, there's no easy answers for this one for sure.
Well, I also have to bring up the point because people are going to comment if we don't. There are a lot of people, and in my opinion, it's fear mongering, but a lot of people are trying to blame the increase of crime on bail reform. So what do we say about that?
I think that you have to look at the actual data. I think there was the young woman who was unfortunately killed, in this spat of like anti-Asian violence, which is like, I can't even wrap my head around that, man. It's like just nuts. But, it was shown that bail reform was not why he was out on the street. And I think that we have to really take a hard look at what laws are being impacted by bail reform. And I think that's another one of those bridges that needs to be built, because there's some serious vitriol out there, between an elected officials who tend to be, in most cases, like-minded. We're kind of going at each other right now. I think we need to take a hard look at the data and see, okay, you know what? Who's really, because again, people tend to forget that bail is just supposed to be a guarantee that you show up to court.
Right.
Starts. Right. But I think that there have been some unfair practices that have the optics have played out because some people have money, some people don't, and it's a tough call. I think there's certain crimes though that, like I remember back on Rikers, man, one guy once told me, he said, yeah, it's like, I need to be locked up. And people have heard on Twitter and elsewhere, and I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "My job, hurt you and harm your family." He told me that was his job.
His job was to harm your family.
My job is to hurt you and harm your family. I need to be his exact words, right? The kind of life experience that I personally experienced. It's not no anecdote. No one told me this. And I was around what I'll describe as some very bad people back in the days. And what was wild to me was some of the hardest criminals that I met on Rikers were some of the nicest people you ever want to meet. They had nothing to prove to anybody. I killed 5 people. So what?
Right.
I don't have to act like where you had the other guys now who in some cases were not that violent.
Chip on their shoulder.
To try and like keep people off of them.
Yeah.
But I think we need to take a serious look at what charges are contributing to crime. Because again, like I said, I'm a firm believer. I don't think we should have to lock people up, but you know what? We have some people who are not programmed properly. And as long as there's like hate and all that other stuff out there and people who are like having mental illness, you can't just not do anything.
So the problem is we're so polarized now politically. It's hard to have these conversations in a serious, nuanced way, because if anyone says something, makes any point like the point you made, the point like Tibbet has been making, or like I've been making, there are going to be people jumping down our throats saying that we're not checking all the right boxes, we're not doing the right things. And then you can't get to a productive solution that way if you're just yelling at each other, if you're leading with emotion, as opposed to trying to address this seriously, because it's never really all or nothing. I mean, I think we always have to try to find some compromise or look at it from all perspectives here, right? We can't have tunnel vision on these issues.
And I think that you can't look at bail reform in a vacuum.
Right.
Bail reform and policing itself go hand in hand, in my opinion. Right. Because should guys be just left to their own vices to kind of like just rifle through the CVS to the point we went to my nephew got married in Philly and we went over to like a Rite Aid in Camden right across the bridge. Bro, they had everything locked up. The toothpaste was locked up, the soap, I mean, everything. I'm like, who wants to live like this?
Well, some people will say that they're doing that now because they're not prosecuting or even arresting people for petty theft anymore.
But that's my point. Where's the balance there? Do you just do you unlock everything and let somebody walk through with a bag and just like clean the shelf off and walk out the door?
Right.
That's not
that was happening in Cali.
Yeah.
That was happening in Cali, wasn't it?
It's been happening. Well, it's happened in New York. It's happening. There's one guy in the Jackson Heights, I think it was a Walgreens. The guy's been like arrested for like 47 times. For like literally like picking the shelves clean.
Yeah.
San Francisco would happen where a guy came on a bicycle and the man just kind of like stood there.
Right, because he couldn't do anything.
There was a Target that was robbed, I think, over 100 times by the same person recently.
So how do you address that? What's the answer? I mean, I don't know what the answer to that is, but I wouldn't want to own that business.
Right.
Then that kind of like morphs into like what I think is a misdirected conversation about the ills of capitalism. I mean, I guess connected, but not in the way that people want to make you think.
I think that's a point too.
Say again?
I said I think that's a point too. Like as far as you said, like addresses different ills. These types of measures or bills or even bail reform or changing laws here, like we have to understand that it's not a single solution. It is an ongoing process. So like you said, you don't want to be locking people up. Yeah. But we have to look at, like you said, there's some bad people out there. So until we deal with the situations that cause those bad people to be that type of people, we have to have some measures in place to protect other people in the meantime. Maybe at some point in the future, we can get to that point where we've created a society where these types of people are created few and far between, but we're not completely there yet.
And that's why it's not an either or.
I think that's a very strong point because, like I always say, this is not a switch.
No, right.
People are like, oh, defund the police and put the money in social programs. And then what do you do with all the people that is like still like bad actors?
Well, I think the defund the police is kind of funny. And someone in the chat actually mentioned that that slogan. And Mike, you and I have talked about it before. It's a bad slogan. Like
that's a god awful slogan.
And it doesn't speak to what they're actually talking about. It's like,
it doesn't give you any information really as to what you might be trying to do, because there are good ideas out there and we've discussed that.
Absolutely.
If you're leading with defund and especially if you're leaving it there, You might not have any idea. You might just want to abolish the police. You could be anywhere on that spectrum. You're not saying what you really want to do.
Exactly. Right. I mean, it's like, yeah, let's take away the funding or the military weapons that some police departments are having. Okay,
Yeah, that's a bit much.
point that out. Say that.
Yeah.
Don't just say defund the police. Like,
Yeah,
say
then I
that.
Yeah, so I have a cousin who lives across the street, and he has some some psychological challenges, and he's known for law enforcement because sometimes he acts out a bit. And one day they showed up. It looked like they were invading a small country.
Right.
I mean, they had Truck 9, they had like 3 RMPs, they had 5 FDNY ESU show. It was crazy. They had on Rikers, we used to call them the Ninja Turtles. So when the officers come out like with the full riot gear.
Yeah, the riot gear. Yeah,
right.
Like 2 dozen of them. I'm like, and my wife goes by, get away from the window, because that's how you become a news story. But this is a kid who's he doesn't carry weapons. So this show of force was like, what y'all just get all the stuff y'all want to test to see if it works? But grossly inappropriate in terms of a response for the situation. I'm like, I've never seen anything like that before.
It's this.
So that, don't show up to my, don't show up with like an armored vehicle on my quiet tree-lined street. Don't do that.
Right.
So I think, again, it's about balance and finding that common ground.
Right.
I mean,
And
Mike knows this firsthand. It's not easy to find that common ground.
that's what I'm saying, right? And I've been
Because like he said,
how do we do it?
He voted for Scala.
That's right.
And then on the other side, though, the support for taking the looking at it from the police point of view, I don't think police officers should be showing up for mental illness calls. That's not what they're trained
People should at least have the option, because I know some people who mental health concerns with their families. Some people have sons who need help and they get out of control. They need to call somebody. They would like to be able to dial 911 and get a professional, mental health professional, not a police officer coming up to their house with a gun who could end up harming that child because that police officer is not properly trained in those mental health issues.
Right. And it's putting more pressure on the police, more responsibilities on them in some cases that really shouldn't be on them. Like, they've got other things that they should be focused on. And when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. You know what I mean? So when they show up, this is a criminal situation to them, and it's not necessarily what's necessary. So I think that message needs to be, if you're going to say defund the police, but that's what's all in the message. Like, your slogan doesn't match that.
Right.
Not at all. Yeah.
And it is. Listen, I can say, from being in Japan, I spent a lot of time in Tokyo. Tokyo is a major city, world city, on the same level as New York. Size-wise, density is probably a little bit more dense. And, it is a culture difference, but it just shows that there is a possibility that people can live in that kind of proximity and have less crime, have less of these issues. But they're just some things that we have to address to make that shift to go on that journey.
Yeah, I think you said before, it depends on like what kind of support you can put toward those social problems that are like leading to these larger social problems. So, but again,
look at the short-term solutions as well as the long-term.
Correct. Right. I mean, it's like this
everyone
is like
wants this crime spike to be addressed, right? But the question is, okay, that might be a band-aid solution, but what do we do long-term to prevent it from happening again or to keep it under control?
So this should be more like 2 trains running on parallel tracks, like one the other one versus one train just like in back of another one.
Or what we have now, which is 2 trains colliding into each other.
2 trains heading exactly. Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Karen in the chat has mentioned a few things here, talking about the NYPD union is dangerously manipulative. Talking about the judicial system's broken. There's a lot of good points here, and corrected mentioned a point on my point about Tokyo, saying that Tokyo is kind of a homogenous city, so the culture is a little bit different, which is very true. There is some of that tension can be an intermix of cultures, but my point was more that it is possible to have various amounts of people, massive amounts of people, and to kind of do this in a better way.
Do you think though that's, I mean, I don't know the stats, I guess, enough, at least not broken down that way to know. I mean, how much of it is, we might not really ever be able to tell, how much of it is people clashing because they're culturally different versus.
Well, I think if I'm not mistaken, the actual crime statistics seem to show that racial groups tend to commit crime within their racial group more than
That is
interracially.
certainly
So white
true.
people commit crimes against white people, black people commit crimes more against black people,
Right.
especially in the murder statistics that I've read.
Well, you would expect that though, because we're so segregated. That's something that doesn't.
Exactly.
People
Right.
talk about New York City being so diverse, and it is. Queens, the most diverse county, I think, on the mainland US.
It's very siloed.
Even within Queens, very segregated.
It's very siloed.
Yes,
Right.
yes. And that's something that's often pointed out, but it's true.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, I just saw an article recently that said that Brown v. Board of Education, which supposedly ended segregation in public schools, is still, public school system in New York State is still very segregated.
Right. Yeah.
I think they say that New York has the most segregated school system in the nation, if I'm not.
Yes.
I've read that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know there are lots
It's
that
the
are
reason
still,
because the neighborhoods are so segregated. So
Right.
yeah. And I think that that's part of it. I think people just tend to be around people who have on the same wavelength as them to some degree.
Yeah.
Some of it's economic. Some of it is, goes back because of, in the days when immigrants were coming through and they would settle into their areas, the little Italies, the Chinatowns, and, all of that type of thing. But,
and to a degree that still happens right now, and it's just morphing. Like you look at like say Hillside Avenue, it's like there's like a large Bangladesh community that's just like developed over there in a short space of time. You go up to Woodlawn in the Bronx, it's still, I know there's a bar up there, I believe it still exists, where they would tell you if you left Ireland, as soon as you get off the plane, you go to that bar and they'll sit you with a job and housing. Because it's still very tight knit that way.
Right.
Arthur Avenue used to be more Italian, now there's a lot of Albanian influence there. So these pockets of community still exist.
Right.
Oh, definitely.
But and it's not all bad either. I mean, it's
No,
not at all. Not all bad. I'm
a good
just
thing because we preserve our culture through generations.
Absolutely.
But they're just like isolated. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
No, absolutely. And I think the younger people are doing a lot of the mixing, and those types of kind of barriers don't exist as much as the generations move on.
Yeah, I see that in my own house. So like my younger son, his girlfriend, she's white and Chinese. My older son's wife is Guyanese and Dominican. So we're seeing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, natural progression.
I think and that's a good thing. I think so.
It's good to have our own cultures, but it's also good to be exposed and interacting with other cultures. Right?
Because you know what the thing is,
isolated.
problems happen when people are strangers to one another.
Exactly.
Those like mixing of the cultures, kind of like you're no longer a stranger.
Exactly.
Not like this mystique, mysterious kind of like person that I don't understand. Oh wow, you're a person just like me.
Exactly. And that's a lot of things that we've talked about out here when we've been, because recently, since the George Floyd thing and my involvement with Black Lives Matter Tokyo out here, some of it's been educating the Japanese public about us and just about racial issues and things in general. And it's because there's a lot of I guess ignorance is kind of the word. They're just unknowing of certain things and other cultures and other people. So there is a fear from people in the Japanese, Japanese citizens in general, sometimes of foreigners in general, not just Black people, but foreigners in general, because they're from different places. But if you get to know people, those, and they get to know them, especially on a personal level, those differences fade away because then you start seeing people as people.
Those walls break down.
Yeah.
But, to bring it back to the larger conversation, obviously this isn't just a cultural problem, right? It's not like we're seeing a bunch of cultures clashing in New York. Crime, right. And like we pointed out, it's people are still in their own areas committing crimes on each other. So
right,
it's much larger than this.
Yeah, economic.
Yeah.
I think economics is probably one of the biggest factors in general.
Well,
even with the
I've always looked at the unemployment rate and the rate of the economy, and I've always been able to draw a connection between those factors and the crime rate. Even when you look at people blaming very hyper-local issues, they're not zooming out enough and looking at the larger picture. You know, you saw, for example, crime under Giuliani, for example, Giuliani was mayor. People gave him all the credit for improving the crime rate in the city. But what was happening with the larger economy when Bill Clinton was in office? When people like getting jobs and making more money, yes, that has a direct correlation with crime in the city. People always want to blame or credit the mayor of the city when you might want to look at the national economy and other factors and just that.
Yeah,
Karen
it's
says
definitely
we have
multifactorial.
record low. Chat message: we have record low unemployment right now.
But that doesn't tell the whole story, though.
Right.
Do you really want to say that we have a good economy right now?
Right. Exactly. And
hurting from
what kind of-
COVID. And unemployment, by the way, is people who are who don't have jobs and they're looking for jobs actively.
They actually stopped.
Right.
Right.
What about people who are now just committed to the gig economy, trying to make it as an Uber driver or whatever they're doing in their hustle?
or they're underemployed, or those aren't
Underemployed.
jobs, or those aren't jobs that are like livable wage jobs.
Yep.
Right.
So a lot of different factors there.
And people are hurting. People are still hurting economically.
Absolutely.
COVID. You know.
Absolutely. So
So this is a great discussion. Any closing thoughts before we wrap this up? On anything we discussed?
I think there's
yeah,
a lot of
man.
work to be done.
a lot of work to be done for sure.
Yes.
But it is possible. I think people need to
Like
understand
conversations like this. I mean, as long as we can not be at each other's throats and have productive conversations and
Right.
be able to introduce various points of view and try to find common ground. I mean, we shouldn't always be on the defensive where it's like we're always attacking each other for having a nuanced opinion. We need more nuance.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting because I look at like my Twitter presence versus my Clubhouse presence. There were certain people that when they heard me actually articulate positions, it wasn't like in 140 characters or whatever they give you. 240 characters limit.
I wrote a whole article about that. Yep.
Like, wow, this guy actually kind of makes sense. He's not like this troll that I thought he was. I mean, there's probably some people that still think, oh yeah, he's a troll on, whatever. But people kind of like when you get a chance to have this dialogue, and maybe that's something you want to think about for a future episode. Because there are a number of people who are not like-minded, who I know are in this same space, who would probably be willing to at least have like a constructive dialogue. They're not looking just to kind of like have a shouting match, and
Right.
But and I think until we can have those conversations, those bridges will not be built.
Right. Especially now with not even just in politics, but in general, people are taking sides. They're taking up their own flag on various different issues, right? You've got the far left, you've got the far right, you've got various LGBT issues, you've got various immigrant things, you've got, everyone's got their issue, and it's an all or nothing thing. There's no discussion going on. It's like either you're with what I'm talking about or you're the enemy and I'm gonna shout you down and burn your children. Like
And Twitter magnifies that effect because you can't explain yourself. You've got to just put your short statement out there, and the shorter and more concise and more punchy it is, the more tweets and love you can get on it. And here we are.
And it's impersonal. Like, when you're talking to someone directly, there's going to be a different feel than if you're just cold reading some text on a screen. You can get a little bit braver, you can get a little bit wilder, or you can misread the tone of the thing depending on your own personal bias of what you think they're going to say to you. So,
Right.
it's a lot of points.
And then you think of the person as that message instead of a whole person, right? With their own thoughts and opinions and feelings. And it's just they become that message that you don't like.
Yeah. Or you've got a block in your head yourself that anything that doesn't say exactly what you want to say is automatically discarded and you don't hear any of it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we have to do better. So let's strive to keep building these bridges. Thank you, Michael. I know you're doing a lot of that work yourself. We really appreciate everything.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be a part of the group tonight.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, appreciate it. Definitely. It's a good chat.
All right, everyone. Have a good night. We'll see you next time.
Peace.